Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Shawnee Mission Unitarian Universalist Church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are in your life's journey, you are welcome here. We are so happy that you've chosen to be here today, that you've chosen this YouTube channel, this Sabbath, this sanctuary and time. We know that you have so many options on Sunday mornings, and that you chose to be here is something that we celebrate. We extend an especially warm welcome to our visitors and anyone that may be watching for the first time at home. If you'd like to follow along with the hymns using a hymnal and forgot to pick one up on your way in, please feel free to grab one later from the carts near the entrance here in just a moment. We now invite everyone to rise and greet each other. If you're joining us online, please say hi in the chat. All right, thank you. We have a few announcements. So if you're a recent newcomer to our church, please consider attending our Just the Basics session today, immediately following the service. This is a 30-minute overview of Unitarian Universalism and this congregation, and will give you a chance to ask questions and meet other new folks. So after today's service, grab a cup of coffee and meet Jim Crist in the foyer near the welcome table. And then we have our all-church picnic. I know we're all looking forward to that. Please join your church friends on August 19th from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Shawnee Mission Park. It's the Shelter 12 for the second annual all-church picnic. Watch your all-church email and the church and the SMUUCh community Facebook group for more information. If you plan to come, there are two things you need to do. 1, sign up to attend. 2, sign up to help or bring something. These can be done online or beginning next week at a picnic table in the foyer. I know. I don't even know what that means. Okay, now we have a few announcements from Jen Lacey.
Good morning. Recently, we have had more and more families with little children and babies visiting us. And we all love seeing babies in the audience. I think last week we had 2. But I also know as a parent that engaging in church services is often easier when my child is not with me, but in a more age-appropriate learning space. Our nursery was closed during COVID, but it is time to open it again to serve our families. To make this happen, we need your help. Each week, we will need a couple volunteers to serve in the nursery. We would like to organize enough volunteers so each person's help is only needed every other month. Volunteers can pick their preferred week, and no one feels like they're doing all the work. If you are interested in helping, you can find a volunteer survey on Realm, Facebook, or in our newsletter. You can also just let me know in person or via email. The goal is to open the nursery by our church kickoff, but hopefully sooner. Thank you to those who have already volunteered. I was very just happy to see how many people have already reached out, so thank you for that. And if you haven't already, please consider. Thank you.
No matter what you have gone through and what others have put you through, you are still you. To embrace happiness, to find your passion, and to love yourself, remember that these things were never taken away from you. Nothing can stop you from rediscovering yourself. The greatest journey always begins within you.
Welcome each other with singing our opening song, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Please stand as you're willing and able.
Okay, as Jen Nelson comes forward to light our chalice, we invite you to join us as we recite our covenant. Let us affirm that love is a doctrine of this church, the quest toward truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another.
Could I have any children who are present please come forward? Big children are welcome too. Hi. Well, today I'm going to tell you about a fairy tale. You've heard a fairy tale before. Has everybody heard a fairy tale before? There are some people that did not raise their hand, so let's tell them what a fairy tale is. What's a fairy tale? Sure. A fairy tale is a tale that has a fairy in it. It's not that complicated. But why do we tell them? Well, first, they can be entertaining, right? They can be funny. They can be scary, and we can sometimes learn from them. And a fairy tale has to have a fairy in it, right? No? Most fairy tales do have a fairy in it. But let's talk about what fairies do. Are they good or bad? Depends on the story. Usually I think they're good. What do they look like? It depends on where you find them. Sometimes they're male, sometimes they're female, sometimes you can't tell. And sometimes they can take the form of real people. What do fairies usually do in a fairy tale? Well, I'll tell you. In addition to a fairy tale usually has a person who is in trouble and needs help, right? They could be lost, they could be confused, they could be afraid, or they could be lonely. Have you ever felt that way? Me too. When I was young, I tried to be a person that I thought other people thought I should be. I felt different in many ways, and I wanted to fit in. So I pretended to be the person that people thought I thought people thought I should be. It was very confusing. Then, a very wise person, who I think might have been a fairy, helped me see that I needed to be the person I truly was, rather than the person I thought other people wanted me to be. And when I started to be the real me, without any pretending, I was a lot happier. And I learned that all along, the people I cared about most just wanted me to be happy. So in fairy tales, the fairy usually helps the person who needs help by encouraging them, or maybe cheering them up, by telling them a truth, by helping them to find out who they really are, like a poor girl who is really a princess but doesn't know it, and by showing them how smart or strong they truly are. I think fairies are pretty cool, don't you? Do you think there might be some fairies in this room right now? I agree. Well, there are, but fairies are very shy, and they sometimes hide from us by taking the form of real people. Would you like to see them? I thought you would. So, what I have in this box is some magic fairy dust. It's new and improved fairy dust that is easy to vacuum up and doesn't get caught in your skin and hair. But we have to do some magic to bring these fairies, to make them show themselves. And we've got the fairy dust. So this is, I want you to take some fairy dust and put it in your hand. So now aren't the rest of you sorry you didn't come up here? So in addition to the fairy dust, we have to use some magic words. You ready? They're very complicated. It goes like this. Fairy, fairy, show yourself. Okay? We're going to say that 3 times. And then after the 3rd time, we're going to shout, now. I'll get some fairy dust too. So what are the magic words? Fairy, fairy, show yourself. Okay, so here we go. Fairy, fairy, show yourself. Fairy, fairy, show yourself. Fairy, fairy, show yourself now. Look, the sanctuary is full of fairies. So I told you there were fairies in this room. And they're very shy, they're very clever, but remember, the next time someone encourages you or tells you a truth or helps you find out who you really are or helps you see how smart and strong you are, it could very well be a fairy. Thank you.
We come to this place to see and to be seen, to teach and be taught, to hear and be heard. We are here together, gathered in peace and authenticity and intention, and that is something that we celebrate. We come to this place to share our joys and sorrows. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, I now invite you to come forward and light a candle. You can share what's in your heart or on your mind in 1 or 2 sentences, or you can share with a single word, or you can share in silence and simply light a candle.
I'm Richard Pease. Just for being, thank you. But in the last 3 years, I've had 2 cancers, and last week I found I beat them both. One of the hardest jobs, the hardest job that all my caregivers and nurses and doctors have told me exists is for a person to help somebody else through cancer that's a relative. If it's not a relative, you can go home at night. But when you are a relative, you have to be there all the time. And to that end, I would like this candle for Heidi, who I think literally saved my life.
I'm lighting this candle in honor of our son, Kyle. He's visiting from California, and he grew up in this church and is the kindest person I know.
I'm Jennifer Nelson. I'm lighting a candle of hope that my friend's family will stay intact.
I'm Jenny Ashby. I'm lighting the candle for a woman who is one of my closest friends and friends to many of you, who died 1 year ago yesterday. Her name was Marta Bainham. We will be having a celebration of life for Marta on the 22nd in the afternoon, starting here at the church at 1 o'clock, and later in the afternoon there will be a gathering in Marta's old home, and the celebration is both for Marta and for her late husband, who died just a few months after Marta did.
Anna and I are really happy to introduce to you our daughter. Her name is Marisol Tomaway, and she's healthy and 3 months old, and we're just so grateful to have this community and grateful that she has a place where she can come and have a faith community.
I have a second candle. My daughter and her husband and my grandson have all moved in with me. That's a good thing.
And I guess I'll light a candle to if it'll light. Who knew this would be the hardest part of my day? All right, I'll just light that to say just that I'm back after I guess almost 4 years now. So, yeah.
Light the remaining candle for those words that were unspoken. Okay, and if you'll please speak these words with me. We hear your words. We witness your life in all its heaviness and brilliance. Your joys, sorrows in a shared heart.
Let's take a moment to come fully into this place. Put your feet flat on the floor. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable and relax into your chair. Allow your breathing to deepen beautifully. Wiggle your jaw. Melt. If you notice an area that is tense or tight, embrace it and say, relax. It's okay to relax. Let the bustle of getting here melt away and come into this space of holiness. Let us just breathe for a time. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. You may open your eyes. We have 2 readings today from the author Melody Beattie. The first is called Responsibility for Ourselves. Caretaking. The act of taking responsibility for other people while neglecting responsibility for ourselves. When we instinctively feel responsible for the feelings, thoughts, choices, problems, comfort, and destiny of others, we are caretakers. We may believe at an unconscious level that others are responsible for our happiness, just as we are responsible for theirs. It's a worthy goal to be a considerate, loving, nurturing person, but caretaking is neglecting ourselves to the point of feeling victimized. Caretaking involves caring for others in ways that hamper them in learning to take responsibility for themselves. Caretaking doesn't work. It hurts other people. It hurts us. People get angry. They feel hurt, used, victimized. So do we. The kindest and most generous behavior we can choose is taking responsibility for ourselves, for what we think, feel, want, and need. The most beneficial act we can perform is to be true to ourselves and let others take responsibility for themselves.
The second reading is Remember to be Happy. I love this. Sorry. The sign hangs on the wall of a bagel shop. Don't forget to be happy. Sometimes we get so bogged down in dealing with our feelings, issues, problems, the realities and details of our lives, we forget to be happy. Often happiness can be ours if we just remember to be happy. Joy is a choice, a deliberate, conscious choice. Our joy isn't controlled by others or by outward circumstances. Joy comes from a deeper place, a place of security within ourselves. It's an attitude, not a transitory emotion. Remember to be kind. Remember to be loving. Remember to feel all your feelings and to take care of yourself. But most of all, remember to be happy.
Stay seated if you'd like for our meditative hymn. We're going to go back and sing that together. Feel free to sing along if you'd like, or if you'd just like to be silent in a wash of sound around you, that's fine too.
Good morning, kids. Good morning. Today, I'm going to tell you a story. It's a fairy tale, which, as we learned earlier, is a story that has a fairy in it. And as is the case with many fairy tales, this one is based on things that sometimes happen in real life. So how do all the best fairy tales start? Once upon a time. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived an angry king. King Richard was his name. And his sad wife, she was Queen Geraldine, who lived together in a grand castle with their little boy. His name was Prince David, who was about 9 years old. No one in the kingdom knew why the king was so angry or why the queen was so sad. But I know. You see, I'm the narrator. I'm the narrator of the story, so I know everything about it. I know everything about the characters, and I even know how the story will end. King Richard was angry most of all because he did not want to be king. He hated everything about kingship, conquering far-off lands, keeping unruly peasants in line, making proclamations and resolving everyone's disputes. Why couldn't he just live out in the country like his Uncle Earl, the Earl, and hunt and fish and enjoy the mountains and streams? Yes, King Richard hated everything about being a king, and this made him angry at everything and everyone. And the person he was most angry with was his mother, Queen Catherine. It was her fault that he was born into a life he did not want. And one day, after drinking too much ale, King Richard banished his mother from the kingdom, sending her to live on a lonely island in the middle of the Western Sea. This made Prince David very sad, because his grandmother, Queen Catherine, was someone very dear to him, someone who was easy to talk to, someone who answered his questions, encouraged him, helped him to figure things out. And why was Queen Geraldine so sad? Well, it wasn't because her name was Geraldine. Like her husband, King Richard, Queen Geraldine did not actually want to be queen. She too felt trapped in a life that was not her own, doing things she did not want to do, hosting lavish feasts for the neighborhood nobles, wearing layer upon layer of lavish clothes, listening to the endless gossip of her ladies-in-waiting, but most of all, living in an arranged marriage to a man she did not choose, an angry king who she was certain did not love her. As a young girl, when Geraldine was just a princess, she and her dear sister, Princess Beatrice, would play and dance to beautiful music. They both dreamed of being dancers one day. But as sometimes happens in fairy tales, each of the two sisters were married off to princes in kingdoms so far apart that Geraldine and Beatrice never got to see each other. Queen Geraldine would often sit by the castle window and cry. As you can imagine, a castle that's the home of an angry king and a sad queen is not a very pleasant place to grow up. And most of the time, Prince David did not know what to do. His grandmother, Queen Catherine, was the only person he could talk to, and she was not there to help him. He loved his mother and hated to see her cry. He didn't know if he loved his father or not. Between conquering far-off lands and quelling peasant uprisings, King Richard was rarely at home. And when he was in the castle, he was so angry that Prince David tried to avoid him altogether. One day, as Prince David walked by the queen's chambers, he heard her crying softly as she sat by the window. He entered the chamber. "Mother," the prince said, "I don't like it when you cry." "But I'm so sad," she replied. "I can't help it." Prince David thought for a moment, and then he had an idea. "I'll dance for you. Watch this." And he started to hum and dance around the room. He leaped and spun and circled his arms as he sung, "La la dee la la da, la la dee la la da." Prince David didn't know the first thing about dancing, so it was quite a spectacle. The queen smiled and finally said, "You are a delight, my little prince." So Prince David kept dancing. He liked to see his mother smile. But just when he was in the middle of a spin, King Richard appeared at the door. "What's this?" the king bellowed, startling Prince David, who tripped and fell, banging his knees on the floor. As the boy sat there rubbing his knees, he heard something he had never heard before. His father laughed. The king roared, "What a silly little fool you are. That was quite entertaining." And he left the room. The following evening, in the grand dining hall, the king, the queen, and the prince had just finished another uncomfortable, silent dinner. The king took a gulp of ale from his mug and barked, "Boy, Why don't you do that dance you did yesterday? It was so much fun to watch." So the boy got up from the table and began to hum and dance around the room. The queen smiled, and the king slapped the table in time to the boy's humming, occasionally taking a swig of ale. The boy danced and leaped and spun and, you guessed it, eventually tripped on the edge of a carpet and fell to the floor. The king bellowed. That was a good one. And so it happened that every day after the evening meal, the boy would dance for the king and queen, always ending with a fall. The king would laugh, the queen would smile, and the prince would just hurt. But he didn't mind because the queen wasn't crying anymore. The king wasn't so angry anymore, and there was a peace in the palace, sort of. As the days passed, something strange began to happen to the young prince. His arms and legs grew stiff like wood. But this helped because it didn't hurt so much when he fell. Slowly, day by day, the little prince turned into a boy made of wood. His smile never changed because it was painted on his face. His eyes never blinked either. He didn't need to eat, so the king and queen fashioned a hook on one wall of the great dining room. And there they hung the boy, taking him down from the hook only when it was time for him to sing and dance and fall. A long time passed, and one day when the boy was removed from his hook and ordered to perform, he just stood there. "What's the matter, boy?" the king roared. "It's time to dance." The boy dropped his head and said, "I'm sorry, Father. I just can't dance tonight. I'm so very tired." A single tear formed at the corner of one of the boy's painted-on eyes. It rolled down his cheek and fell to the floor. And when that single tear struck the floor, something magical happened. A wisp of mist began to rise from the tear, and the mist started to form a small cloud in the room. And the cloud started to take the shape of a person. The king, the queen, and the prince watched the cloud become clearer and clearer, and finally, there, standing before them, was a fairy. "Who or what are you?" the king asked. "Didn't you hear the narrator?" the fairy replied. "I'm a fairy." But, the king started. "You look exactly like my Uncle Earl, the Earl." "No," the queen said, "you look exactly like my sister Beatrice." The fairy turned to Prince David, who quietly said, "But to me, you look just like my grandmother, Queen Catherine." The fairy explained, "Yes, the thing about fairies is that there is so much work for us to do in the world that the same fairy often has to appear differently to different people at the same time. We call this multitasking. We need to appear to each of you as someone important in your life. Someone you trust, someone maybe you even love. I've always envied my Uncle Earl, the Earl," said the king. "He taught me a lot before I became king." And the queen added, "My sister Beatrice and I were very close as sisters." Prince David thought for a while and for a moment, well, Grandmother Catherine was always so kind and encouraging before she had to go away. The fairy continued, "And we need to appear as someone important to you, someone you trust, so you'll listen to us when we come to help you." "Help us?" the king said. "Yep, that's what I said," the fairy replied. "But we don't need any help from anyone," said the king. "We have all the riches we desire. a fine castle to live in, and lots of servants to order about. The fairy held up a finger. Yes, you have all the things you just said, but the most important thing of all is missing. No one said anything. They just waited for the fairy to continue. None of you are happy. The room remained silent because they all knew the fairy was right. Finally, the king said, "So, if we don't have happiness, how do we get it?" "Happiness," the fairy began, "is not something you get. It's something you have." "You just lost me," the king said. "How can we have it if, as you say, we don't have it?" "Oh, you have it," the fairy said. "You just have ignored it for so long that you don't realize you have it. Happiness is like a jewel at the very center of your heart. Would you like to see it?" The king, the queen, and the prince all nodded. "Then do this," the fairy said. "Put your right hand over your heart, put your left hand over your right hand, close your eyes and whisper these words. Every person deserves happiness. I am a person. I deserve happiness too. My happiness matters. My happiness belongs to me and me alone. I am the caretaker of my happiness." "Now, don't just say the words," the fairy told them. "Believe the words because they're true." So they said the words. Then they said them again and again. And as they did this, a strange thing started to happen to Prince David. His skin became a little softer. He blinked. Ever so slowly, he became a real boy again. Eventually, the fairy said, "Now cup your hands together and hold them out in front of you." The fairy held out her cupped hands and opened them to reveal a beautiful, multicolored jewel that sparkled like a rainbow and cast a warm light into the room. "This is my happiness," the fairy said. The king opened his hands and said, "Mine is black and hard and heavy, like a piece of coal." The queen opened her hands and said, "Mine is white and cloudy, like a piece of chalk." The prince opened his hands and said, "Mine is as clear as glass and very tiny, only the size of a pea." The fairy addressed the king and queen, saying, "Each of you feels you are living in a life that is not your own, but whose doing is that? You have felt angry and sorry for yourself when all along you had the power to change your life, to follow your true happiness. You have this power, and it doesn't even require fairy dust." The fairy turned to the boy and said, "And you thought you could make your mother and father happy." But the boy said, "I do love them, and I want them to be happy." "Dear sweet child," the fairy said, "you can love someone, and you can care for someone, but you can't make anyone happy. You don't have the power to do that. Not even fairies can do that. Happiness comes from the inside, not the outside. Anger and self-pity are easy. Happiness can be difficult. You must work on it yourself. Only you can make it happen." But the boy said, "Isn't it bad to seek your own happiness when others are not happy?" "How thoughtful you are," the fairy said. "Yes, we must each work on our own happiness. That is the way it is. But if our happiness comes at the expense of others, that is not happiness, that is selfishness. And if our happiness does harm to others, well, that's just wrong." "I see," said the boy, and then looked up at the fairy and continued, "But my jewel is clear and it's so tiny. Why?" The fairy smiled. "You are so young. Your life has only just begun. You haven't found your happiness yet. You have to try different things. Explore the world around you. Explore yourself. Find out what makes you happy. And as you do this, your jewel will grow and the colors will come. When you are young, you must find your happiness inside." The fairy looked at the king and queen. "And when you are older, you need to follow your happiness." And the fairy leaned over and added in a whisper, "It's not too late. It's never too late." The king and queen looked at each other and understood. The boy had one more question. "Suppose after I find my happiness, it has nothing to do with being a king. I'm the next in line." The fairy smiled and said, "We can always find another king, but there will only ever be one you. Find the life you were meant to live. Find your happiness." The fairy, the king, and the queen, and the boy talked long into the night, and in the days that followed, the king renounced his crown, abdicating the throne, and went to live in a forest cottage just down the path from his old Uncle Earl, the Earl, and spent his days enjoying the mountains, fields, and streams. Queen Geraldine gave up her crown as well. She opened a dance studio in the village, sharing her love of dance with many others, and eventually reunited with her dear sister Beatrice. With the king and the queen abdicating, the crown reverted to Queen Catherine, who, to the delight of everyone in the kingdom, returned from exile to rule as monarch, which she did with fairness and compassion, until Prince David was old enough to ascend to the throne. Prince David did eventually discover his happiness and treasured it always. He never saw the fairy again, but sometimes when he looked into his grandmother's eyes, he thought that maybe, just maybe, the fairy was in there somewhere. Did Prince David ever become king? Well, that's another story. But one thing I can tell you for certain, and you're probably going to guess what happens next, they all lived happily ever after. May it be so for us all.
The work of the church depends on us, our generosity of time, wisdom, and financial resources. We invite you to give generously to support the ongoing work of the church. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared values.
Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and learn. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you for which way to turn, to learn what to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. Careful the wish you make, wishes are children. Careful the path they take, wishes come true. what you can see and turn against you. Careful the tale you tell, that is the spell. Children will listen.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Please stand with me in body or in spirit for our closing song. It's a very recognizable tune, so feel free to sing with whenever you realize it. Fairy tales can come true, it can happen to you if you're young at heart. For it's hard, you will find, to be narrow of mind if you're young at heart. You can go to extremes with impossible schemes. You can laugh when your dreams fall apart at the seams. And life gets more exciting with each passing day. And love is either in your heart or on the way. Don't you know what it's worth, every treasure on earth, to be young at heart? For it's rich as you are, it's much better by far to be young at heart. And if you should survive to 105, look at all you'll derive out of being alive. And here is the best part, you'll have a head start if you among the very young at heart. Yeah.
This week, take some time to consider the jewel in the center of your heart, your happiness. Could it use a little polish, a little care? Make it glow, make it shine. It's not too late. It's never too late. And don't forget to be happy. Go in peace.